Come with me as we go on a journey into the morally grey depths of pretty much just reading posts on a foreign language Twitter account because Nintendo of America and Europe won't give us everything for some reason. This is almost certainly going to be the last piece of new info about the game that I tell you prior to, like, June, when either E3 or Nintendo Direct that takes place when E3 normally is happens, and gives us what I'm assuming is going to be a bigger, more detailed trailer. However, this info is very interesting, and unfortunately, not officially posted in any language other than Japanese. If you follow either Nintendo America or Nintendo of Europe on Twitter, then you might have noticed them posting small little bios for characters and a couple world details over the past few days. This is nice, but it is roughly a third of the information the official Xenoblade series, remember we don't have that outside of Japanese Twitter account posted, because every point that got one tweet in the English versions got 2 tweets in the Japanese versions. And Japanese can convey more information in a smaller amount of characters, so yeah, the English tweets are missing out on over half of the details provided in Japanese. As I do not understand the language myself, I'm going to have to rely on translations to properly understand everything. I have looked through multiple ones, and they do all seem to largely agree, but for the purposes of this video, I'm going to just rely on ones that I found on Reddit. For the majority of the tweets, I am going to be using a post by Joseki100, which, as far as I can tell, basically just did the job of plugging all of the text into DeepL for me. And for the relationship chart, I'm going to be using one posted by slight_examination83, as it is the most recent translation I found, so it's probably had more time put into it, and also contains myriad translation notes that comment on different translation choices that previous versions by other people had used. Thank you to both of these posters. Those posts, as well as the More Information Than NOA UK Xenoblade 3 site, and a link to the Tetsuya Takahashi letter to the fans, will all be in the description. With the exception of the translated relationship chart, I will just be showing the images that accompany whatever tweet I'm talking about on screen, so until we get to that point, you can feel free to tab out and just listen to me. I will also be providing commentary and analysis on these posts as I get through them, which is why this is not a Xeno News video. However, I'm not going to go as ridiculously in-depth as my previous videos analyzing the trailer. I will probably be connecting back to things I said in those videos though, so if you want to fully understand everything I'm talking about analysis-wise, you probably do have to watch those. I'm sorry, it's like 2 hours, but I might be calling back to things I said there because I don't want to spend another 2 hours here re-explaining points. Also, there will be spoilers for Xenoblade 1 and Xenoblade 2. I'm going to continue providing the spoiler warning for every Xenoblade 3 related video, because sometimes I might have things to talk about that actually don't have to tie back to those 2 games, just not quite yet. First up is our male lead, Noah, Japanese VA Ryohei Arai. He is an 18-year-old soldier of Keves and wielder of a bright red weapon. He has a slim build, but his physical abilities are quite high. The way he holds his weapon makes him look like a samurai. Noah is the Offsear of Keves, who mourns for the soldiers who lost their lives on the battlefield. Having experienced the death of many of his comrades on the battlefield, Noah is fighting against a world that only allows him to take the lives of others in order to live. This is fairly simple, and is just bringing together a few other Noah-related things we already knew about, except for a couple things that I think are just translation issues, since this, again, is a machine translation. It says Noah is the Offsear of Keves. This is not true. We can clearly see other people playing the exact same flute at a later point in the trailer, so Keves has multiple Offsears. It's a big country, a lot of people are dying, they can't get away with just one person, and the whole fighting against a world that only allows him to take the lives of others in order to live thing lends even more credence to the clock theory that characters have clocks on their weapons and need to kill other people in order to extend their own lifespans, as when the clock runs out, they die. The whole slim build and high physical abilities thing just makes him sort of like Shulk, but he's actually a trained soldier and not a weapons developer who can lug around a 6-foot-tall thing of metal for no reason. And the samurai thing just makes me think that he's Uzugi-esque even more. Biggest detail probably, though, is his age. Noah is 18 years old, and in fact, all 6 of the main characters are going to be 18, with the exception of Mio, who is 19. This is very interesting because, first off, it's heavily implied that these guys have been fighting for at least a decent period of time, which means, alright, both nations are okay with child soldiers. It also means that blades and long-lived races from Xenoblade 1 are aging like normal humans somehow, which is really weird and suggests that different races in Ionios just work completely differently than they did in Bionis, Mechanis, and all rest. And it also sort of implies that we're probably going to get more characters. You'll see what I'm talking about later, but it really seems like they're trying to go with the young protagonist trio from both nations, and then we're also going to get additional characters that are either going to be from either one or neutral or something else that are going to be older and fall in the more mentor-like role. When I get through all three Keves characters especially, you'll see that they heavily parallel the 18-year-old Shulk, Rhine, Fiora trio from Xenoblade 1, and those characters were the youngest three from that game, and all the rest of the party members were older, or Melia, who is technically, like, biologically and maturely wise younger, but still 88, and as such, we're definitely going to get older characters, they're just not going to be the focus. Xenoblade 1 is not the only Xeno game to do that, as the three most important characters in Xenogears were also all 18, and while the game did have a couple younger party members, it also had a few older, more mentor-like ones. People have brought up possible time loops or just general time shenanigans, and that's also distinctly possible, and it also might be, with the high resemblance a lot of these party members have to previous characters, that the soldiers of Agnes and Keves are not necessarily wholly original people or descendants or whatever. They could be clones or engineered in some way to help perpetuate this war, which is why they are all 18. There's also a period of time in the history of Xenogears where humanity's lifespan was heavily decreased and people living past 30, like before dying of old age, I'm not talking about disease like in the Middle Ages, was an unusual thing, so they could be pulling something like that, but based on how old Not Van Damme looks, that's probably not the case, and it seems like, yeah, these people are young, and there's a reason that they're not just all young, but they're all identically young, with the exception of Mio. Speaking of Mio, her tweets say that she, Japanese VA Minami Suda, is a soldier of Agnes who freely controls the twin rings. She's one of the fastest, and she's good at dodging attacks too. She's 19 years old, and her ears are kind of distinctive. Mio is also the Offsear of Agnes. She's sincere, kind, and well-liked by her friends, but she seems to be the type of person who keeps her problems to herself. Again, just like with Noah, the Offsear is almost certainly a mistranslation. If Keves has multiple, then Agnes also has multiple. As I said before, Mio is the only non-18-year-old. She is 19, though I am assuming that they only made her 19 for something related to Senna, which we'll get to later. The whole thing about her ears being kind of distinctive is basically just them being coy with like, yes, she looks like a Gormati, and specifically a lot like Nia, who is a blade that looked like a Gormati, and we're not going to tell you about how that happened quite yet. They do the exact same thing with Yuni later on with her wings, so this is just them basically winking at the camera and nudging the audience so that people who have played Xenoblade 2's minds are expanding as they try to figure out what the hell's going on, and everyone else is just like, yep, she's a cat girl. That's a thing in anime, I'm not super surprised. The neat thing about Mio, though, is that she does not play like a twin ring blade in Xenoblade 2. She's fast and good at dodging attacks. Mio seems like she is going to be a dodge tank like Dunban and Morag using Brigid, and not the healer of the Agnes trio. It seems like we are going to be sort of breaking roles, at least a little bit, as far as the Xenoblade 2 side is concerned. With the Xenoblade 1 characters, oh yeah, Noah, DPS, Yuni, healer, Lance, tank. That's like 100% true. They are literally just doing the exact same thing that the quote-unquote main trio of Xenoblade 1 had, where you have a Shulk-esque guy, a Rhine-esque guy, and a Fiora-esque girl, except the Fiora-esque girl doesn't seem like she's going to die early on, and plays more like Charla, so you can have the full trinity. So, it looks like they're going to do the one side. We're playing that completely by the book and orthodox, so that people who played 1, yeah, could just go right in, play with those guys. It's basically exactly what you're used to, but they're experimenting a lot more with the 2 side, because 2's combat is so much more different, so much more complex, and so much more customizable, and I really like that, how they're not just overcorrecting for people's criticisms of either 1 or 2, it seems like they are actively trying to cater to specific people who liked both games, or might have only liked one of the 2 previous ones. Also, Mio being a tank is cool, because she's the first tank protagonist in all of Xeno, unless you count Ziggy in Xenosaga Pied Piper, which is like the only non-translated Xeno thing that has gameplay in it, so I kind of barely count it. Also, it's stranded on a couple breeds of early 2000s Japanese cell phones, that don't exist anymore. So good luck even being able to find a ROM of that thing to play it yourself, or make a translation for yourself. But anyway, Twin Rings, kind of bad in Xenoblade 2, so making the Twin Ring user a dodge tank instead of a healer is also a good move, because that means she might play better than Twin Rings did in Xenoblade 2. This also does somewhat shoot my theory that Mio isn't a flesh eater, she's actually a bleed eater using a flesh eaterized version of Dromark's core crystal in the foot, as if she had Dromark powers, she would be a healer and not a dodge tank, but that was mostly a meme theory, and this means that Dromark is even more likely to still be alive, which means we might get a super boss of him, not even with Nia, just Dromark, to show just how far the protagonists need to get to in order to match up with the legendary heroes of the past. Personality-wise, the female lead of a JRPG being sincere, kind, and well-liked by her friends is definitely well-trodden ground, even by the Xeno series, but I think the little bit we see of her implies that she is going to actually have a personality, not just be girl, so I'm not super concerned about that, and the fact that she seems to keep problems to herself is good, because that means she's going to actually have her own insecurities, and it's not just going to be her working with whatever Noah has going on and his issues. And based on lines in the trailer, it does seem like they're going to be mutually supportive and help each other out, which is really nice, and there is actually nothing in any of this so far to imply any sort of romantic subplots, so if you have a male lead and female lead helping each other through their own problems in a purely platonic way, that might be one of the best male lead, female lead relationships in all of Xeno, because kind of bad romance is another hallmark of this series. The Japanese account basically posted one character from each nation every day for 3 days in a row, but after Noah and Mio, there was also a lone tweet that was just a picture of them playing the flute, and said, "In this world where we live to fight and fight to live, we never know when we or our friends will lose our lives. The sound of the flutes of Noah and Mio, two people who have given many lives as departed souls, is both beautiful and somehow sad." It's basically just saying, the flutes are part of what an Offsear does. The whole given many lives as departed souls would imply reincarnation, but again, that's just a wonky translation. I went back to the tweet, and even just the default Twitter translation is basically just saying, yeah, they've sent these people away as an Offsear. Next up is Lance, Japanese VA Kosuke Tanabe, a soldier from Keves like Noah, who is an 18-year-old who uses his large physique to his advantage, freely handling a large sword that can also be used as a shield. He is a reliable ally who fights while protecting his friends. Lance has been living with Noah since he was a child, and due to a certain incident in the past, he thinks that he will protect his friends even if it costs him his life. Perhaps because of this, he often takes his own life lightly and acts recklessly, which worries me. Presumably me in that sentence is just Noah. It's interesting that they specified child here, as you could theoretically say, he's a machina. They could have just assembled him looking like that, and he was assembled 18 years ago and has just been friends with Noah the whole time. Nope. He was a child. Machina do age at Homs rates in Ionios for whatever reason. Was it intentional? Was it interbreeding? Was it just something about this planet? I don't know, but this is just a fact of this new world. While Lance's weapon is unique in its design, its type of weapon has been seen elsewhere in the trailer. You can actually see that a lot of the generic Homs soldiers in one specific picture of the Keves army are using it in sword mode, while in the trailer he's mostly just using it in shield mode. Other than that, the fact that he's reckless and wants to protect his friends, presumably because Noah got hurt in the past, is very par for the course for a character like this. He seems like he's going to be a little bit less himbo than Ryan, if only because they didn't mention anything about him being kind of slow with academic-related things or whatever. I would assume that he's going to be the least quote-unquote smart one of the Keves trio, just because that's how the big guy works in stuff like this. That's just a trope, and that's how things happen. But other than that, like I said, he's probably going to be a simple, yet fan-favorite character, just because he's kind of like Ryan. Still not a lot to say about him. Senna, Japanese VA Miyuki Sato, a soldier of Agnes, is an 18-year-old who uses a giant hammer. She works with Mio, and her hair and parts of her body glow blue, and she's freaky. Senna has been spending time with Mio for a long time, and she even looks up to Mio, who's a year older than her, as if she were her big sister. Her hobby is muscle training, and she is proud of her strength and cheerful and energetic. However, she is shy and doesn't seem to have much confidence in herself. Alright, first off, again, it's a machine translation, that's why it repeated a bunch of things weirdly and called her freaky when it was basically just, again, them being coy with her having blade-like features, so that's not a big deal. And then second off, This is the only reason Mia was 19 and not 18 like everyone else as far as I can tell, because they wanted Senna to look up to her like an older sister, and they basically just chose the literal bare minimum in order to make that possible by making Mia exactly 1 year older. So it seems like Senna is going to be the general short, cute girl who's a little shy, carries big weapon trope, and from everything we've seen, it implies that she is going to be a DPS character and not a tank like shield hammers were in Xenoblade 2. So again, she's probably going to be more viable than shield hammers were in Xenoblade 2, which is nice. I'm also going to say that her hobby is muscle training, and while we don't even know if muscle training works for blades like it would for humans, they're still absolutely cowards for not giving her muscles, as she is the least clothed character in this entire party, and while Zenobia and Newt were also the two least clothed rare blades in all of Xenoblade 2, they also had muscles, actually, so I'm less likely to complain about that. Let the strong girl actually look strong. This is only like 40% a horny post. From what we've seen here, I can probably guess that her character arc is going to be her getting more used to interacting with strangers and becoming more confident in her abilities, because it's like, oh, she likes training, but she's not confident that it's actually paying off, even though she swings around that giant hammer like it's nothing and is capable of giving Lanz's defenses a run for their money. So it's probably going to be a lot of that. She's going to probably be the source of a lot of the really cute, wholesome moments, and I like that. Small girl with big weapon is just like always a good trope, and if they make her a nice, well-rounded character, then all the better. Next up is Yuni, Japanese VA Megumi Han, a soldier of Keves, is 18 years old and the wielder of a gun rod, a gun in the shape of a staff. She is a childhood friend of Noah and Lanz, and seems to be good at recovery in battle. I've seen those wings on her head somewhere before. Yuni has a very frank personality, which is probably why she's a bit outspoken. She's also the most crass member of the group, but she's good at classroom learning. She respects Noah and has a good relationship with Lanz, to whom she can say whatever she wants. She also seems to have a stronger sense of responsibility for her friends than most people. If you have seen Enel speak about this character at all, you have probably heard that she isn't Fiora 2, she is Shion Uzuki 2. And just based on the trailer, I knew she wasn't going to literally be Fiora, she just looks the most like her and takes her spot in the Keves trio, even though she plays like Charla. But yeah, she's absolutely now a lot more like Shion just based on this bio, in terms of having a frank personality, being outspoken, basically calling out BS more frequently, and being the smart one. So that's nice, and I also like the fact that she's definitely an inversion of Fiora in that she respects Noah as a soldier, but unlike Fiora not really liking Ryan a bit, she has a good relationship with Lanz, because he's a more straightforward meathead, she's a sort of straightforward smart girl, but she can basically just say whatever she wants to him because she knows he's not going to care. The responsibility for her friends thing probably suggests that she lost someone important to her in the past, which is why she wants to heal and all that stuff, so that's neat. In the English Yuni tweet, Gunrod is spelled as one word and capitalized, so we actually do have the official English name for her weapon type, and while Taion's bio, which we're going to get to in a minute, heavily suggests that weapon customization is not going to be literally swapping out for a stronger weapon, Yuni is going to be a Gunrod user, and I'm assuming that's going to show up in a lot of places, as the exact same Keves army image that has the Lanz weapon being used in sword mode also shows at least one other Gunrod user holding it up and probably using it in staff mode for healing. They still did not specify if the staff is for attacking and the gun is for healing yet, so hopefully we get info on that in the future. Lanz and Yuni both have weapons that are basically two weapons in one, so maybe Noah's Monado can actually transform into something else as well, but that remains to be seen. The other thing gameplay-wise related to Yuni that remains to be seen is whether or not healing will actually be fun in this game, and whether or not being the Charla-like automatically makes her the worst character, but I have hopes that Shulk's Replica Monado technology was at least able to improve on Colony 6 Defense Force technology and some random berry Ricky found in the woods once technology, and maybe, just maybe, the fact that Yuni's gun also has a staff attached to it allows it to vent heat better and won't have her have to use cool-off. Please. Moving on though, Agnes's soldier Taion, Japanese VA Ryohei Kimura, is a wielder of a mysterious paper-like weapon, the Katashiro, and he's even named it Mondo and loves it. He is 18 years old, a thoughtful tactician who is good at supporting his friends. He wears dark glasses and an orange scarf as his trademark. Taion works together with Mio and Senna, and Mio and the others trust him for his high level of insight and tactical judgment. While he has a strong personality, he can be overly cautious and become blunt if he gets impatient, which can be a bit of a problem. This is more or less what I would expect from this game's equivalent to Akos in HB, where He's a trustworthy ally and is very smart and has a good tactical mind. He's presumably going to be the support character, not necessarily pure healer, out of the Agnes trio. But because he's so smart, he can sometimes miss the forest for the trees, or become blunt and rude when something related to his tactics goes awry, and that can be an issue. This is good characterization. I'm looking forward to see more of him, but like with Lens, there's nothing particularly surprising about finding out that he's like this. The interesting thing, though, is his weapon, the Katashiro. The Japanese version of the tweet actually went out of its way to specifically write it in both katakana and kanji, and that is because Katashiro is not just a made-up thing, it is an actual Japanese term, and I know exactly why the weapon name for Yuni was shown in the English tweet and not the weapon name for Taion, because, well, let's face it, if there is anything in this game that the localizers are still trying to figure out and have 7 months left to make work properly, it is going to be a legitimate Japanese term that is a cultural thing that does not exist in most Western cultures. Being extremely brief and only relying on my very limited knowledge and small amount of Googling, Katashiro, which in kanji literally just means substitute, is a sort of talisman that originates from very ancient Japanese practices, and in its current form takes the form of a humanoid paper doll that is used as a substitute for an actual person in various Shinto rituals, and just in general as either a stand-in for an actual person in terms of praying for them or trying to curse them, or as a more metaphorical representation of a human who's not there. This is obviously just the bare minimum basics, and there are plenty of variations and evolutions over time, so this is a crash course and not a direct explanation of everything a Katashiro can be used for, but probably the most important thing is as the basis for the summoning of a Shikigami. And you might be a lot more familiar with this term, as it's just a summoned creature where you have an inanimate thing used to represent something, and you then summon a kami into it and are able to use that to do your bidding, or whatever. And of course there are stories of letting your Shikigami get out of control and mischief and stuff happening, but if Taion is this smart, presumably he doesn't let Mondo get out of control in any way. Basically, a spirit would inhabit either a paper construct of some sort that had talismans or whatever, or figures drawn on it, or an inanimate animal corpse, and you could then control it and do various things with it, which this seems to basically be the basis for Taion's abilities, as while Mondo has a name and he seems to care for it, some translations saying like a pet, it does not seem like it's directly based on an actual person, living or dead, so while it might be possible that the spirit of Taion's dead mother or whatever is in his weapon and animating it, it doesn't seem like that's the case based on his relationship to it. He cares for it, but not in the same way he would care for an actual person who he was close to. Based on his official art, it seems like the default form of Mondo's paper figures is in this more humanoid Napon thing with eyes, but he is then able to use the gauntlet on his wrist to transmute them into other forms, presumably by folding like origami, as we see him use birds a lot in the trailer, and he can then use this to attack, defend, or do support things. It seems like he's going to be the support character, as we see him making a staircase for Mio to climb on, as well as generating either a shield or a field to help out Yuni at various points in the trailer. Gameplay-wise, though, the fact that Taion has this close of a bond to his weapon, and the fact that it has its own name, heavily suggests that at least for the Agnes characters who have blade-inspired weapons, that weapon customization is not going to be going to a store, purchasing a new weapon, de-equipping the old one, and equipping the new one, and it's probably going to be more like core chips in Xenoblade 2, as unless he keeps the Shikigami, and the only thing that changes is the gauntlet, I think it is highly unlikely that Taion would willingly switch out his weapon at any possible point. There's also the fact that the clocks seem to be tied to the weapons, and that Ouroboros are an important thing in this world, and you can see Ouroboros symbols on characters' default weapons in their official art, so it's probably that you modify your own weapons into being better or having different perks or whatever, rather than picking up and swapping out a new weapon, and this is probably going to be the case for Noah, just in general, no matter what happens for everyone else, because he has the Xenoblade this time, even if that seems to largely be a custom version of a mass-produced replica Minato. That's it for the main characters, and obviously these guys are all playable to some degree, but there are a few more tweets that are more general and about the world. The first one is, Xenoblade 3 takes place in the world of Ionios, which is made of 2 nations. In the large and spacious fields, we can see the ocean and giant creatures. In addition to swimming, it looks like there's also some kind of boat-like vehicle, but tightrope walking is dangerous. This is largely just, hey, the world is big and you can explore it because this is a Xenoblade game. None of this should be surprising to you, though. The next tweet is more interesting, though. The armies of Keves and Agnes are based on huge mobile weapons called Iron Giant Gods. There are dozens of Iron Gods in Keves and Agnes, and each of them is an independent army and living place. I can't wait to go there. The Iron Giant Gods where the soldiers live are called colonies. The colonies are numbered, and some of them have various roles such as producing weapons instead of fighting. So, the big mechs we see in the trailer are not just big mechs that are part of the nation's armies, they are also mobile posts and places for people to live. Do you know what this means? The Keves soldiers, who are the descendants, spiritually, of the Colony 9 Defense Force, actually went and did it. The absolute madmen turned their mobile artillery into a house. And yes, that means if two Keves mechs collide, you will have a mobile artillery that is also a house crashing into a mobile house that is also artillery. I love it. I also love how they are straight up just bringing back the concept of numbered colonies from Xenoblade 1, but having a completely different spin on it, as they're just independent vehicles that have a detachment of soldiers, or probably civilians for at least the resource gathering ones, living out of them, and they might even be moving around the overworld as you go, and you can interact with them in different ways in different places. At several points in the trailer, most of which are the images you're seeing on screen now because they were put in the tweet, you can actually see the characters running out to different colonies from different nations, which is really cool and suggests that while yeah, you're probably going to be at odds with at least the leaders of the nations, you might be able to sneak into the less militarized colonies and do like shopping or side quests or whatever, at least during parts in the story where you're not public enemy number 1. Next tweet is about the Van Damme looking guy and says, this person in the video also told Noah, Mio, and the others that they are not enemies. I feel like I know this person, but he seems to have a similar vibe. What in the world is this land where the big sword is standing? This more or less completely confirms things that I was saying in the trailer analyses, where not Van Damme is going to be some neutral third party who connects the Keves and Agnes trios together, tells them they're not enemies, and sends them off to where the Mechonis Sword and Orion Titan are in order to find out the secrets of the world and discover who the real enemy is. This is not really much to say about this. They don't give any more speculation on who this person could actually be other than saying, yup, he looks like Van Damme. So this is largely just a big W for my theorizing. And then we have Napon. Oh yeah, our Napon tribe is also making an appearance in Xenoblade 3. There's Riku, a Napon with dapper thick eyebrows, and Manana, a Napon wearing a cocked hat. We'll have to wait and see what kind of Napon they are. So yes, the blue Napon with Rex hair is named Riku. Now I could make a joke about this, or I could outsource it to the crowd. So what I'm going to want you to do here is pause the video, then scroll down to the comments section, type in the best Kingdom Hearts Riku Napon related joke you can think of, post it, then while you're scrolling back out to watch the rest of the video, hit the like and subscribe buttons if you haven't already, because I want all the support I can possibly get to make more cool Xenoblade 3 videos. Got it? I'll give you like 5 seconds and then we can continue on. Okay, so actually about these characters, they did not hint as to whether or not they're party members, but again, they carry weapons, so they probably will at least fight, if not be playable in some way. They could be support characters or whatever. And the fact that Napon exist, and that there's two Napon that look like they're from the opposing nations that seem to be working together, is not really a big deal, because I figured the Napon would be war profiteers the instant I saw that there were two fighting nations that were from two different universes, because Napon are the one universal constant in all of Xenoblade. So again, not really a big surprise, but these are more interesting looking Napon than we've seen before, because they look completely different from Napon in either 1 or 2. So things might have happened, or maybe these Napon are from a completely different world entirely if every Xenoblade world has them. Who knows? Not really a lot more you can speculate on, just more laughing about the fact that they actually named one Riku. Alright, we can move on to the relationship chart now, as the actual tweet that it was posted with basically said, this is all the info we have for now, and links the trailer if you wanted to see more. So, this chart is largely a summary of things posted previously, so I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time on it, but I do think it's really, really funny how they have question marks instead of names for the leaders of Keves and Agnes, as if we couldn't tell who these characters very blatantly are. But I'm honestly hoping that they delay actually saying that they're Melia and Nia as long as possible, because I want to see them come up with more and more elaborate ways of not explicitly saying their names and, like, trying to justify not explaining it, even though it's really obvious for as long as possible. So, yeah. The other thing is, in the backgrounds of the Keves and Agnes boxes, we can see what appear to be the symbols for the two nations. The Keves one looks sort of Monado-esque, and the Agnes one looks sort of Core Crystal-esque, so no big surprises here. If you want to see these in a bit cleaner state, then just look at the banner for the Xenoblade JP Twitter account, as that has it cut off, but a bit less covered. And we can, in fact, see the Agnes emblem on Taion's outfit. So again, nothing really surprising here. I'm also not really going to go in depth over everything, but I'm instead going to invite you to look at the translator notes, because you may have seen other translations of this that came out earlier and had what are presumably going to be mistakes in them, especially the thing where it says that Yuni is not a secret admirer of Noah's, that was a mistranslation, because there is no romantic connotation in Japanese, which is really nice, because I don't want another stupid love triangle. It also even more explicitly shows that Van Damme is not part of either nation. People thought he was going to be from Keves because he wears quote-unquote dark clothes, even though they're obviously gray and not black. And oh, look at that, the background of his box is even gray and not black. Who could have possibly guessed this? It also even more explicitly shows the role of every character in battle, except for Noah for some reason. It just says he uses a deep red weapon. And yeah, I really don't have much to say about this. It's pretty much just a conglomeration of all the other tweets into one, and hints a little bit at interpersonal dynamics that we're going to see before the two parties come together, although a lot of that could have still been inferred just from the previous information. So pause this video and read it at your leisure, or just find the original post in the description and then look for other translations if you're not completely convinced. I don't really have anything else to say, so hopefully we get more Xenoblade 3 news sooner rather than later. I don't know if I can wait until E3, but yeah, I'm going to have at least 2 more speculation videos about this before I go back into normal content, so sorry if you were looking for videos about any other game in the series, but until then, this is Luxon, signing off.